Hello and welcome to Life Diary. My name is Mikhailu, and today I want to share a realistic and emotional story about an unexpected meeting, awkward first words, and a love that had to fight to survive. What began as a shy, almost failed conversation slowly turned into a journey filled with hope, fear, and quiet strength. This is a story about youth, real feelings, and holding on to love when life puts everything to the test. So if stories like this speak to you, please subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Hello, my name is Brian. I'm 29 years old, and I work as an engineer. I live in a quiet part of the city, not far from my office. My life is pretty ordinary. I design systems, solve problems, go to work in the morning, come home in the evening, and tell myself I'm comfortable with routine. I've never been the loud type. I've always believed that if something is meant to happen, it will happen naturally. Still, there was always a feeling that something was missing, even if I couldn't put it into words. That morning started like many others. I left my apartment early, stopped at the small cafe near my office, and ordered the same coffee I always did. The place wasn't fancy, just a few tables, soft music, and people passing through on their way to somewhere else. I liked it because no one expected anything from you there. That's when I noticed her. She was sitting by the window, sketchbook open on the table, pencil in hand. She looked focused, but calm. Not rushed. Not distracted. Just present. I remember thinking that she seemed completely comfortable being alone, and somehow that made me notice her even more. I stood there longer than I should have, pretending to check my phone, pretending I wasn't thinking about walking over. My mind started racing, offering me lines that sounded clever in theory, but ridiculous the moment I imagined saying them out loud. I told myself to forget it. Finish the coffee. Go to work. Be normal. But I didn't. I took a breath and walked toward her table. Halfway there, I almost turned around. My heart was beating faster than it should have over something so simple. When she looked up, surprised but not annoyed, my rehearsed words disappeared completely. I was going to say something smarter, I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. It sounded better in my head. For a second, she just looked at me. Then she smiled. Not a polite smile. A real one. That's cute, she said. And it works. I laughed, mostly out of relief. I introduced myself. She told me her name was Monica. She was 28 and worked as a designer. She explained that she often came to this cafe to draw before work because it helped her think. We talked about small things at first. Coffee. The music playing in the background. How strange mornings feel before the day fully starts. The conversation wasn't smooth, but it was honest. There were pauses. Awkward ones. And somehow, those pauses didn't feel uncomfortable. I noticed she smiled when she listened, not just when she spoke. She asked questions and actually waited for the answers. At some point, she admitted she had been nervous too. I thought you were going to ask me for directions, she said, laughing. I almost did, I replied. That was my backup plan. We both laughed again, and something shifted. The tension faded. It felt like two people meeting exactly where they were, without trying to be more than that. Time passed faster than I realized. When she glanced at the clock, she sighed. I should go, she said. I'm already late. I nodded, suddenly worried that this was the end of something that had barely begun. Can I walk you out? I asked. She agreed. Outside, the street was busy, full of noise and movement. We stood there for a moment, neither of us quite ready to leave. I'm glad you said something, she said. Me too. I answered, surprised by how true it felt. She hesitated, then smiled again. Maybe we'll see each other here again. I'd like that, I said. She walked away, turning once to wave before disappearing into the crowd. I stood there longer than necessary, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. I didn't know if it was a date. I didn't know if it meant anything more than a simple conversation. But for the first time in a while, I felt like something had quietly begun, and all I had done was say the wrong thing at the right moment. I didn't expect to see her again so soon, but 2 days later she was there, sitting at the same table by the window. This time, I noticed her before she noticed me. She was drawing again, headphones on, one foot gently tapping against the chair leg. For a moment, I wondered if she would even remember me. That thought alone made me smile at how quickly she had stayed in my head. When she looked up and saw me, her face changed instantly. You came back, she said, pulling one earphone off. So did you, I replied. She laughed. Fair point. I ordered my coffee and joined her without asking. This time, it felt easier. Not easy, but easier. like the first layer of awkwardness had already been peeled away. We joked about our last conversation. She admitted she had replayed it in her head later, wondering if she should have said something different too. I almost told my friend about it, she said. Then I realized how strange it would sound. I already told mine, I admitted. He said it was either fate or a very good accident. She smiled at that, then closed her sketchbook. We started meeting like that. No big plans. Just coffee, short walks after work, sitting on a bench and watching people pass by. Sometimes we talked a lot. Sometimes we didn't. And strangely, the silence never felt heavy. It felt like space, not distance. I learned that Monica liked to work late at night when the city was quiet. She learned that I planned everything too far ahead and still felt unprepared most of the time. We laughed about how different we were and how familiar it already felt. One evening, after walking her home, she stopped at the entrance to her building. "You don't have to come up," she said gently, almost apologetically. I wasn't expecting to. I replied quickly, then paused. "But I'd like to see you again." She looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "I'd like that too." That was how it began. Not with a dramatic moment, but with a simple agreement. As weeks passed, our lives slowly started overlapping. I learned her routines. She learned mine. She came to my place one evening, and we cooked a simple dinner that took twice as long as it should have. We burned the food a little and laughed about it, eating anyway because neither of us cared enough to start over. One night, sitting on my couch, she looked around and said, "Your place feels very you." I wasn't sure if that was a compliment. "How so?" I asked. "It's quiet," she said, "and thoughtful, like you've arranged it to make sense, not to impress anyone." I thought about that later, long after she left. I realized that was exactly how I felt around her. I didn't feel the need to impress. Just to be honest, there were still awkward moments. I said the wrong thing sometimes. She misunderstood me once or twice. But instead of pulling away, we talked about it. Slowly, carefully, like two people learning how to trust not just each other, but the situation itself. One evening, we were walking after dinner when she stopped suddenly. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Of course." "I was scared you'd stop trying after the first week," she said. "A lot of people do." "I was scared you'd think I was boring," I answered. She laughed softly. "You're not." That night, we didn't rush anything. We just stood there longer than necessary, holding hands without making a big deal of it. It felt natural, like the next step had been waiting patiently for us to notice it. Months passed quietly. We spent holidays together without announcing it to anyone. We met each other's friends. We learned how the other reacted to stress, to tiredness, to bad days. There were small disagreements, but no drama. When things felt uncomfortable, we talked instead of walking away. One evening, sitting at the same cafe where we first met, Monica looked at me and smiled. "You know," she said, "I'm glad you didn't say the smart thing that day." "So am I," I replied. I realized then that we were no longer just meeting. We were choosing each other. Not loudly, not suddenly, but every day, in small ways. And without noticing exactly when it happened, being with her stopped feeling new and started feeling right. By the time a year had passed, being together no longer felt like something new we were testing. It felt like something we were building. Monica moved into my apartment quietly, without an official decision or a dramatic conversation. One weekend she brought a few boxes, then a few more, and suddenly her things were everywhere. Her sketches appeared on the fridge, her sweaters on the chair, her shoes by the door. The apartment didn't feel smaller. It felt fuller. Life settled into a rhythm. Mornings started with shared coffee and small conversations about the day ahead. Evenings were a mix of tired silence and easy laughter. We learned how to give each other space without drifting apart. When work was stressful, we didn't pretend everything was fine. We admitted it, and somehow that honesty made it easier. One night, while we were washing dishes together, Monica said, "Have you ever thought about where this is going?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to say it carefully. "I think about it all the time," I said. She dried her hands and leaned against the counter, watching me. "I don't want to rush," she said. "But I also don't want to pretend I don't care." I nodded. "I don't either." That conversation opened something important. We started talking about the future without making it sound like a plan written in stone. We talked about where we wanted to live, what kind of life felt right, what we didn't want to repeat from our pasts. Eventually, the conversation turned to family. "I want kids," Monica said one evening, almost casually. "So do I," I replied, just as calmly, even though my chest tightened when I said it. There was no dramatic reaction, no surprise, just relief, followed by a quiet smile. We didn't start trying right away. We wanted to be sure. But the idea stayed with us. It shaped how we looked at things. When we passed playgrounds, when we visited friends with children, when we talked about time and priorities. Slowly, without announcing it, we stopped preventing it. We let life take its course. At first, it felt exciting. Every month carried hope. We didn't talk about it much, but we both thought about it constantly. When nothing happened, we told ourselves it was normal, that these things take time, that stress can affect everything. Months passed. The excitement turned into quiet worry. Monica started tracking things more carefully. I started reading things I didn't fully understand, but pretended I did. We reassured each other, sometimes a little too quickly. It will happen, I said. Yes, she answered. Of course. Eventually, it was her who suggested seeing a doctor. I agreed, trying not to show how nervous I was. The appointments were calm, professional, almost too ordinary for how important they felt to us. Blood tests, questions, waiting rooms that smelled like disinfectant and patience. When the doctor suggested further tests for me, I didn't think much of it. I told myself it was routine, that we were just being thorough. The day we went in for the results, the room felt too quiet. The doctor spoke gently, without rushing. "Brian," he said, looking at his notes, then at me. "The chances of you having children naturally are very low." The words landed slowly. I didn't react right away. I felt Monica's hand tighten around mine. "What does that mean?" she asked quietly. "It means there may be medical options," the doctor replied. "But it will be difficult." We left the office without saying much. Outside, the city moved as it always did. People laughed. Cars passed. Life went on without noticing that something had shifted for us. In the car, Monica stared out the window. I watched the road, gripping the steering wheel too tightly. "I'm sorry," I said finally. The word felt heavy and useless. She turned toward me. "Why are you apologizing?" "Because this is my fault," I said. "Because I know what you want." She shook her head. "This isn't about fault." But I could see the sadness in her eyes, and it broke something in me. That night, we sat on the couch without touching, both lost in our thoughts. I felt like I had failed her in a way I couldn't fix. The days that followed were harder than I expected. Monica tried to stay positive, but I noticed the way she went quiet sometimes. I withdrew without meaning to. I didn't know how to comfort her without feeling like a reminder of what we might never have. One evening, she said, "We can still be happy." I nodded, but the words felt hollow. The tension didn't explode. It settled in. Small misunderstandings turned into arguments. Not loud ones, but sharp enough to hurt. We argued about work, about timing, about nothing and everything. Every evening seemed heavier than the last. One night, after a particularly silent dinner, Monica asked, "Are you pulling away from me?" I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't lie. "I'm scared," I said, "that I'm holding you back, that you'll wake up one day and realize you wanted more." She looked at me for a long time before speaking. "I chose you," she said. "I didn't choose an idea." Her words stayed with me. They didn't fix everything, but they reminded me why we were here. We decided not to give up, not on each other, not on the possibility of help. We agreed to try medical options, knowing they might fail. We agreed to keep talking, even when it was uncomfortable. Especially then. The road ahead felt uncertain and heavy, but it was still ours. And for the first time since the doctor's office, I felt something close to hope again. The weeks after that decision were some of the hardest we had ever lived through together. Nothing dramatic happened on the surface. We still went to work. We still cooked dinner. We still slept in the same bed. But something invisible had settled between us, like a quiet weight that followed us from room to room. Medical appointments became part of our routine. We learned new words we never expected to use in everyday conversations. Numbers, chances, timelines. Each visit ended with careful phrases and cautious hope, and each drive home felt longer than the last. We talked about practical things, but avoided the deeper fear that sat behind all of it. I blamed myself constantly. Even when Monica never said a single accusing word, I heard it in my own head. I noticed how she looked at children in the park a second longer than before. I noticed how she sometimes went quiet in the evenings, staring at nothing, lost in thoughts she didn't share. Stress found its way into everything. Small things started to matter too much. If I came home late, she felt alone. If she was tired and distant, I felt unwanted. We didn't shout. We didn't throw accusations. Our arguments were quiet, controlled, and exhausting. One evening, after another long day, she said, "I feel like we're always waiting for something." I rubbed my face and sighed. "We are. That's what scares me," she said. "What if we spend our whole lives waiting?" The question stayed in the air between us. I didn't know how to answer it honestly without hurting her. Another night, the tension finally broke through. We were sitting at the table, barely touching our food. "I hate that I see you hurting because of me," I said. She put her fork down. "And I hate that you think this is only about you." "It is," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. "You wanted this. I wanted this. And now I'm the reason it might never happen." She stood up abruptly, pushing the chair back. "I didn't choose you because of what you could give me," she said, her voice trembling. "I chose you because of who you are. And what if that's not enough for you someday?" I asked. She looked at me, tears filling her eyes. "What if you decide it's not enough for you?" That question cut deeper than any argument before it. We stood there, facing each other, realizing how close we were to losing something we still loved deeply. That night, Monica slept on the couch. Not out of anger, but because we both needed space to breathe. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment since the doctor's office. I wondered if love could survive disappointment. I wondered if staying was braver than letting go. In the morning, she was already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. "I don't want to fight with you," she said quietly. "I don't either," I answered. We talked then, really talked, without trying to protect ourselves. She admitted she was scared of becoming bitter. I admitted I was scared of becoming someone she resented. We cried, not because we were angry, but because we were exhausted. From that point on, we made a decision that had nothing to do with doctors or treatments. We decided to stop treating each other like fragile glass. We agreed to say when we were overwhelmed instead of pretending we were fine. Some evenings were still tense, but they no longer ended in silence. The treatments began slowly. Each step came with hope and fear in equal measure. Sometimes Monica was optimistic, and I was the one pulling back. Sometimes the roles reversed. We learned to take turns being strong. There were setbacks, appointments that ended with disappointment, weeks when it felt like all our energy was being poured into something that gave nothing back. During those times, the stress crept back into our relationship. We argued more often, about schedules, about money, about words that came out wrong. One night, after another failed attempt, Monica broke down completely. "I don't know how much more I can take," she said, crying into my shoulder. "I feel like my body is betraying me too." I held her and realized how wrong I had been to think this was only my burden. It was ours. Fully. Completely. "We don't have to decide anything right now," I said softly. "We just have to get through tonight." That became our way forward. One night at a time. Months passed like that. Heavy, uncertain, but still shared. There were moments of closeness that surprised us. Laughing at something stupid on television. Falling asleep holding hands without meaning to. Those moments reminded us why we were still here. One evening, after a long walk, Monica stopped and looked at me. "Promise me something," she said. "What?" "Promise me that if this never works, we'll still choose each other." I didn't answer immediately. Then I said, "I already am." She leaned into me, and for the first time in a long while, the fear loosened its grip just a little. We didn't know how the story would end. We didn't know if our hope was realistic or foolish. But we were still standing together, bruised but unbroken, refusing to let disappointment decide who we were. And somehow, in the middle of all that pressure, our love didn't disappear. It changed. It grew heavier, deeper, more honest. After everything we had been through, life became strangely quiet. Not easy, but quieter. We stopped counting days and appointments. We still followed the doctor's instructions, but without the same intensity. Something in us had softened. We were tired of living only for a result. Monica returned to her late-night design work. I buried myself in projects at the office. We still talked, still checked in with each other, but the constant pressure slowly loosened its grip. For the first time in months, our evenings felt almost normal again. One morning, Monica sat at the kitchen table longer than usual, staring at her coffee. I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Are you okay?" I asked. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and uncertain. "I don't want to say anything yet," she said. "I don't want to be wrong." My heart started beating faster. "Say what?" She stood up slowly and walked toward me, holding something small in her hand. When she opened her palm, I understood before she spoke. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world didn't explode into joy the way movies show it. It went silent. Then everything came rushing back at once. Relief, shock, fear, gratitude. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "The doctor confirmed it this morning." I pulled her into my arms, and we stood there, holding each other, both crying without trying to stop it. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because we had survived something that almost broke us. The pregnancy wasn't easy. We were careful, cautious, and more anxious than we wanted to admit. Every appointment felt heavy with expectation. But slowly, confidence replaced fear. We started allowing ourselves to imagine things again. A small room becoming a nursery. A future that felt real instead of fragile. When our child was born, the hospital room was quiet and bright. I held that tiny life in my arms and felt something settle inside me. A sense of arrival, of purpose, of peace. Monica watched me from the bed, exhausted and smiling. "You're very quiet," she said. "I'm trying to remember this," I replied. "All of it." Life after that changed in ways no one can fully prepare you for. Sleep disappeared. Time lost its meaning. But our home filled with something new. Not just responsibility, but warmth. The kind that comes from knowing you built something together and protected it when it was weakest. One evening, months later, we walked past the same cafe where we first met. We stopped without saying a word. "You know," I said, smiling, "I still can't believe that's how this started." "With a bad line?" she teased. "With an honest one," I corrected. She laughed softly. It really did work. I looked at her, at our child between us, and understood something clearly. Love wasn't about perfect moments or easy paths. It was about staying, choosing each other again and again, even when the future felt uncertain. Our story didn't end with a miracle. It ended with something better. A life we built slowly, imperfectly, but together. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. For me, this story is a reminder that real love is often quiet, awkward, and tested in ways we never expect. But it's built by choosing each other again and again. What do you think about Brian and Monica's journey? Have you ever experienced a moment when love was tested, but you decided to stay? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments.